It was a crisp autumn evening when Derek and his friends gathered for what was supposed to be a relaxing game night. They had been planning it for weeks: pizza, video games, and laughs. Just a simple night for a group of close friends to unwind. Derek had just moved into a new neighborhood, and he was looking forward to a peaceful night, free from the usual stresses of work and life. But he didn't realize how quickly things could spiral out of control. Around 9 p.m., just as they were getting into the heat of the game, Derek heard a knock at the door. At first, he thought it was just a neighbor or someone dropping by to say hello. But when he opened the door, he was greeted by the harsh, cold glare of two uniformed officers. "Evening," one of them said, his voice clipped and professional. "We've received complaints about loud noise coming from this address. We need to speak with the residents." Derek felt a wave of confusion wash over him. "Complaints? I'm not sure what you mean. It's just a few friends hanging out." The officer didn't seem to care. "Let us in, please." Derek's heart started to race. Something felt off. Why were the police showing up for something so trivial? He had lived in this neighborhood for less than a month and had done nothing wrong. But when you're a black man, even the smallest inconvenience can escalate quickly. His mind immediately began to race. Were they here because of him? Was it just a simple noise complaint, or something more? Against his better judgment, he stepped aside and let them into the living room. As soon as they walked in, Derek could feel the tension building. The officers scanned the room, their eyes moving from the friend seated on the couch to the sound system that was playing background music. "You need to turn down the volume," one of the officers said flatly, glancing around with a disapproving look. Derek nodded, trying to keep his voice calm. "Sure, no problem. I'll do that right away." But then, as he was about to step towards the speakers, the second officer, Officer Daniels, made a strange move. He pulled out a flashlight and began to shine it around the room. His eyes lingered on Derek, and Derek could feel the weight of his stare. "Do you live here?" Daniels asked, his voice suddenly colder, more calculating. "Yeah, this is my house," Derek replied, confused but keeping his tone steady. Officer Daniels didn't look convinced. He glanced around, his eyes narrowing. "Are you sure? Because you don't seem to belong here." Derek's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, I don't belong here?" His voice was sharp now, frustration seeping through. The officer's gaze flicked to his partner, then back to Derek. "What do you do for a living, Mr. Turner?" Daniels asked, his tone now almost accusatory. "Why does that matter?" Derek asked, his voice rising. Officer Harris, the first officer who had come inside, stepped forward. "We just need to confirm some things. Just answer the question." Derek was starting to feel trapped, his chest tight. He had done nothing wrong, but he was being treated like a suspect. "I'm an engineer," he said, his voice strained. "I work at a tech company downtown." The officers exchanged a look. There was something about their demeanor that felt wrong. They weren't just here for a noise complaint anymore. Derek could feel it in his gut. This wasn't about volume. This was something else entirely. "Mr. Turner," Officer Harris said, "can you explain why a few of your neighbors said they saw people entering your house late last night? People they didn't recognize?" Derek's mind raced. "That was probably just me and my friends. We were up late last night finishing up some work." He took a step back, trying to understand the situation. "I don't know why people would be talking about it. I'm just here with my friends." But Officer Daniels wasn't letting up. "We'll need to see some ID, just to confirm your identity," he said. His voice was too calm, too controlled. Derek's hands were shaking now. He wasn't going to back down, but the tension in the room was palpable. "I already told you who I am. I don't understand why you're doing this. I've been nothing but respectful." Officer Harris moved toward the door, his gaze never leaving Derek. "Let's keep this civil, Mr. Turner. We don't want this to go any further." But just as Derek was about to protest, something else happened. The neighbor who had allegedly made the complaint, an older white man named Mr. Clark, suddenly appeared at the door. He had a smug look on his face as he stepped inside, standing beside the officers. "See, I told you," Mr. Clark said, pointing to Derek. "I knew there was something off about him." Derek's heart sank. He had only met Mr. Clark once, briefly, and hadn't had any issues with him. But now, Mr. Clark was standing there, clearly hoping to get Derek into trouble. For a brief moment, Derek's mind went blank. His body went cold, and he could feel the eyes of his friends on him. This had gone from a simple noise complaint to something much darker, and he didn't know how it was going to end. But before things could escalate further, something unexpected happened. Derek's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it quickly, relieved to see a message from his sister. "Don't let them intimidate you," she wrote. "Call your lawyer. Now." Derek took a deep breath. He couldn't let them win. He couldn't let this man, this officer, or anyone take his dignity. "Call my lawyer." Now, Derek said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The officers paused. The power of that statement seemed to make them rethink their approach. Mr. Clark's face fell as he realized that Derek wasn't going to be the easy target they expected. The officers exchanged glances, unsure of what to do next. Finally, after a long, tense pause, Officer Harris nodded curtly. "Fine," he muttered, clearly frustrated. "We'll leave you to it." As they walked out, Derek could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He had dodged a bullet, but he knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. He had stood up for himself, but he knew the fight wasn't just about one night, it was about every night, every moment he had to prove he deserved to be treated like a human being. When the door closed behind them, the room was filled with silence. Derek collapsed onto the couch, his body shaking, but his resolve stronger than ever. His friends surrounded him, their faces filled with concern, but also admiration. "That was crazy," Malik said quietly. "But you handled it." Derek looked around the room, grateful for his friends, his family, and his own strength. "It's not over," he said. "But I'm not going anywhere." This story is designed to be intense, gripping, and emotionally charged. It builds up tension throughout the encounter, with moments that seem like they could turn violent, but it also shows the resilience and strength of the main character. The story highlights the importance of standing up for yourself and using legal knowledge as a tool in moments of injustice.